Hello, everyone. This is amazing. Can I just say, from where we've come, the old Nextflow conferences we used to have at the CRG and what we have now, and seeing all the old and new faces that have just, become part of both the Nextflow and NF Core communities is absolutely awesome. I've kind of sort of become part of the furniture in both of those communities, and probably need to be reupholstered as a result of that. But it's been an amazing journey with loads of really cool people along the way. And so, yeah, I'm Harshil Patel. I'm head of scientific development at Seqera Labs. I was a bioinformatician in a core facility for a very long time, learned the tricks of the trade, mostly genomics type stuff, and then picked up Nextflow, met Phil, started contributing to NF Core, written some of the core pipelines that are quite heavily used, like RNA-seq, which I now maintain, ViroRecon, which was used throughout the pandemic for SARS-CoV-2 analysis, and all of this in collaboration with members of the community. It's absolutely awesome. So I'm going to talk to you today about NF Core modules. It's been mentioned quite a bit over the past couple of days, and it really has sort of changed the way we sort of live our lives in terms of developing pipelines. Essentially, what a module is a unit of Nextflow. And so this is the NF Core RNA-seq pipeline. Again, this was contributed by the community. I had some input, but James and Sarah made this. And so this kind of shows you the route that you can go through the RNA-seq pipeline. There's various individual steps there that are essentially units or modules. And then you can also have chains of these modules together, like, for example, the fastqc, Yumi tools, trim galore, and fastqc. You can bundle those as a single, what we call now, sub-workflow. And what's great about that is you now have functional units of Nextflow that you can share amongst pipelines. We've got 70-odd pipelines on NF Core. We want to be able to share this functionality. And so NF Core modules is a unit. Sub-workflows is sort of a chain of modules. This is just some more blurb that explains that. A workflow, following on from that, is an end-to-end implementation that is then composed of modules and sub-workflows itself. So when we went about developing NF Core modules and thinking about how we want to tackle this, a lot of this was driven by the fact that Nextflow, the first DSL in Nextflow was what was called DSL1. That allowed you to write a main script with all of the processes inside, but the weakness with that is that if you wanted to rerun the same tool, you had to copy that process physically in the file again to run it. What DSL2 now brought, when Paolo implemented it a few years ago, was the ability to essentially import or include modules in pipelines. And so that way you can reuse them and you can share them across different pipelines and even reuse them within the same pipeline. So this was very powerful. When we went about sort of deciding how we'd like to tackle this, it was going to be a mammoth effort, but luckily we've got numbers, and so we went about discussing how we would do this. These modules had to be flexible, so they'd need to be installed in any Nextflow workflow, not just NF Core pipelines. They need to be automated. We love automation on NF Core. It just means that we don't have to do things manually. We can test things, do things really quickly, and just fix the stuff that's broken. They had to be portable. So one of the strengths of Nextflow is the fact that it can run on virtually any platform. And so we needed to write these modules in a way that was portable. And also, we wanted to build a community around it where everyone can contribute. And so it had to be practical. People had to be able to come in and have a very simple way to contribute these modules back to the community. Reproducibility, as we know, is very important. And so that was key in some of the decisions we made as to how we go about using this. We use biocontainers mostly for all of these modules. It's great because we don't have to host our own images. Amazon, who announced yesterday, are hosting a mirror of the biocontainers that are mostly on Quay.io now, and so we can just pull them and use those directly from where they are. Documentation, also very important. We need to have some sort of provenance as to how this module was generated, also information about the inputs and outputs, and other key stuff that would be good to track. And they had to be standardized. We can't build an infrastructure or a toolkit without having some rules as to how you need to develop certain things. And NF Core is very big on standardization, but overall it's very helpful. You know, like, I mean, a week and a half ago, we realized we needed to actually do something about sub-workflows at the hackathon. And so as a result of that, we had to restructure all of the modules on NF Core modules. And that's about 700 modules, each with their own tests. So we really had to make sure that things are standardized. And when you need to make those big changes, standardization helps immensely, because you can just make changes, do a find and replace, which is pretty much what I've done. And you change everything all in one go across loads of files. So in terms of how this all came about, 2009 was when I first created this repository. It sat there for a while doing nothing because we needed to actually start figuring out how we'd like to go about implementing NF Core modules. So as it stands, it's just a Git repository, a GitHub repository, NF Core modules itself. It's got these wrapper scripts that we add directly to that GitHub repository. Anyone can contribute via pull request and update the code base. And so it just keeps on growing. We had a couple of sprints at various hackathons, and then the real work really started when we decided that actually the NF Core RNA-seq pipeline would be the first one we'd properly use as a proof of concept to convert from a DSL1 to a DSL2 pipeline. And so there were various learnings at that point. We didn't have a toolkit, and so a lot of this I was basically doing manually to try and keep up and test and get some sort of standardization together we could use on NF Core. Eventually, we then added this to the NF Core tools pipeline template. And then in March 2021, we went from sort of 45 modules to 105. We added CI tests for Docker, Singularity, Conda. We unified the test data. That's very important as well. Having really nice minimal test data is incredibly important for unit tests. And so we went about trying to have some sort of standardized test data that we can use for this testing. Most of it's based on SARS-CoV-2, because as we know, there's a lot of that knocking about at the moment. So we use SARS-CoV-2, and where required, we amended that to other species as well. And then we also added tooling in March. We started adding some commands we can use to automate all of this to NF Core tools, which I'll show you a bit later on. And now, so March 2021, and so a year and a half later, we've got 638 modules. It's really taken off. We've got 160 contributors, and it's awesome because we have one source of truth. Anyone updates a module in a single location, we can then install and pull that in directly within pipelines. It just works. So yeah, it's constantly evolving, it's constantly growing. We try to keep things as simple as possible. We've obviously got our own best practices, and as I mentioned, we've got test data, and we've also built a bunch of tools around querying the GitHub API to pull in these modules and install them in pipelines. So a module itself is just a few files, really. So there's a main script, which contains the Nextflow process. There's a meta YAML that contains some documentation about who wrote the tool, any licensing information, inputs, outputs, authors, that type of stuff. And then we have 3 files for tests that you need to edit. And so this is essentially just running the main script for the module in various different ways to unit test it. And in the test YAML, you can then have MD5 sums and various other logic to test whether the output files produced by that module are exactly the same. And so that's really neat, because now we can sort of have unit tests for these things. If a contributor comes in and changes a module, those tests will break. So they need to fix them, and everything in that code base is constantly working. So I'm going to do a live demo now. Help me, demo gods. Yes, I wrote this morning, so a lot has been happening throughout the hackathon. It's been intense, it's been awesome. So hopefully some of this works. Okay, so what I'm going to do quickly is check that I've got NF Core installed. You can install this via pip or anything else. We have loads of different tools that you can use in NF Core tools. I thought the best way to show how it works, a lot of this has been mentioned over the past couple of days, that we've got tooling and we've got modules, but the best way to do it is actually just dive in and show you, I think. And so So yeah, so the NF Core tools, there's loads of different options to create pipelines, lint pipelines, add modules. Hot off the press is a new sub-workflows command as well, which I'll show you at the end. So what I'm going to do now quickly is just create a quick pipeline. So now this creates a boilerplate sort of pipeline with various files in it. It's up to you. If you want to use this outside of NF Core, it's completely up to you how much of this you use. I find it's easier to delete things than to add them yourself. There's lots of different things here for CI tests and linting and other things that are really helpful when you're writing pipelines, just to have some sort of standardization in terms of how you develop your pipelines. So this is a vanilla pipeline that I've created from NF Core tools. There's various files here that are quite important for modules. So one of them is this modules JSON file. This is where we track where the module was installed from, and also the names of the modules and the Git hash that it was installed from. And I'll show you in a second how that updates. And so that gives us an idea as to exactly which modules are installed in the pipeline and what version they are. So this version is actually, this hash is coming from the commit on GitHub. So let's now look at the NF Core modules commands that I have available. We can list the modules that are installed in the pipeline to see what's there. And so by default, the pipeline template comes it comes with a few modules pre-installed. What's going on here? Oh, there we go. It needs to be in this directory. So this will tell you which modules are installed, which is also basically a copy of what's in the modules.json that I just showed you. It says where they come from, the hash, and the message for the commit. And so yeah, this was this uber massive merge of all of the changes that we've done to accommodate sub-workflows. You can even list the remote modules, but this may not be that useful because there's like 638 of those. We've added options to the website that allows you to search for these by tag. Thanks to Matthias. You can do various things to filter down, and it's probably easier to just search here for that sort of stuff. Where's my terminal? Right, okay. So that's listing the modules. We can install a module. So in honor of Rob Patro, let's install Salmon. So this module file is sitting on GitHub. NF Core tools will simply just pull it down, and you'll see now the hash for that is in this file. Similarly, we can install Salmon Quant. Oops. And again, this should update in a second with that hash. Let's just reopen it. There we go. So that's installing modules. It's really as simple as that. You even get an include statement that you can use directly in the workflow. So it makes it really easy to just plug this in as part of the pipeline. So that's installing. You can update. Now this command was a revelation for me because I was physically updating all of these modules manually myself. But now we've got an update command that you can just say, go and update all of my modules. You can even get diffs of what's changed dumped to file, so you know exactly what's changed. But I'm not interested in that. I just want to update everything. And so this will go through all of the modules. If anything's changed on GitHub in NF Core modules, it will then reinstall and update the hash in that modules.json, and it will also update the file for you. So you don't have to do anything other than just adding a command there. You can lint modules as well. So this will go through. And I just want to lint all of the modules that I've got installed, and it will look for any issues or things that you need to update. So we lint for best practice that we've got implemented, and if there's anything doesn't look right, then this tool will basically go and do that. So for example here, one of the functions in this also checks that the containers that you're using are up to date, and it gives you a little warning saying you need to update this container and buy containers. And so that way, if there's a latest version of a tool, which there is for Salmon here, we can go away and update that on NF Core modules and reinstall that back in the pipeline, and this lint warning will disappear. you can even do other cool stuff. So where are my modules? So the modules are installed here in this modules NF core folder. These are the Salmon ones that I've just installed. So let's just pick Salmon Quant. This is what the module actually looks like. It's just the main script. It's a Nextflow process. So those of you that write Nextflow are familiar with that. But this has gone through various iterations of improvements from the community to improve it for everyone. So it just works. And so here, let's just change this module. And then let's lint again. What should happen is that this will fail. And the reason it's failing is because the local copy of your module now is different to what's in the remote GitHub repository. And given the fact that we're tracking the hashes in the modules.json, we need to let pipeline developers know that actually there's something not right here. Your module, you've changed your module, you need to somehow factor this in. And so what we also have is this really cool patch command. That essentially creates a diff between the module in the remote and what you have done to this particular module locally. And so that way, whenever you do that, you see this diff appear in the module folder. That then is also tracked in the, let me just open this again. That is also then tracked in your modules.json. So now you can install NF core modules from wherever they want. You can make minor amendments if you need to, and have them being tracked as patches. When the module gets updated, the same patch will be applied. And so again, it means that you can really, add your own bits to NF core modules if you like. You can change things, and it gives you a lot more flexibility that way to do things like that. So that's basically how you can interact with some of the core modules commands within a pipeline sort of context. You can also create modules. Now, this here is just a clone of NF core modules that I have locally, and you can quite easily create a module here. It asks you for a name. Process labels, sample information, whether you'd like to include that, and it goes away and it creates these files for you when you want to contribute this module. And so that makes it really easy because everything comes in a standardized format. There's heaps of to-do statements in there here that we've added that tell you exactly what you need to do to change this module. As you become more comfortable with the tooling and how this is done, it will obviously become a lot easier. That test YAML that I mentioned earlier is just a YAML file that we use with a tool called PyTest Workflow. That goes away and it runs Nextflow for you, and it looks for all of the output files. It can check the MD5 sums of these output files, and this is where the unit testing comes in. And so that means that whenever you run these tests, that the output files are either exactly the same, or you can even add various different logic for strings that are contained within the file, or the fact that the file exists or the file doesn't exist, or even if this workflow errors. So there's various ways that you can do that. We are looking at another tool called NF Test, which is more Groovy based and Nextflow native. And as a result of the hackathon, we got a prototype ready to really start working on that. The authors are really receptive of this sort of stuff, and it'd be awesome to ideally transition to something that's a bit more native to Nextflow. This uses Python validation, but it works awesome. Like, you can do these tests locally when you're contributing a module, or via GitHub Actions when you're creating pull requests. So that's creating a module. You can even create test YAMLs. So these tests, especially when you have a module that creates tons of output files, you don't physically want to be going through and writing a YAML file for all of the output files and all the MD5 sums. And so this create test YAML file, I won't run it now because it will probably break something, and I'd rather not embarrass myself. So yeah, so that will create this test YAML for you based on the tests that you've specified in the main script for the tests. So again, it takes the pain out of that. And this is also particularly important when you start working with sub-workflows now, because these are chains of modules that contain loads more output files for each module. And so what you want to be able to do is use this command, for example, with sub-workflows to create that test YAML for you all in one go. And which brings me on nicely to sub-workflows. Let's go back to the pipeline. Sorry, this is just an alias to come back to the directory that I was in. As a result of the awesome work that we've been doing over the past couple of weeks on the hackathon, and thank you everyone that has contributed, we can now also install sub-workflows. So I'm going to pick one that is very commonly used in most genomics. It's basically just taking a BAM file, sorting it, running some samtools stats on it at the end, and then dumping that out. And this can be plugged into any pipeline, however you want. It's a small functional unit that should work. And so here now, what you've seen is that all of the dependencies of this sub-workflow itself is calling other modules and calling other sub-workflows. And we were able to resolve that and install them for you when you request to install that particular sub-workflow. So if we go back to our favorite modules.json, what you should now see is all of these modules have been installed. They're now being tracked. We also have another section called sub-workflows where these sub-workflows are now being tracked as well as a result of them being installed in the pipeline. I won't show you this now, but I tested it and it works. We can also, just take my word for it. Yeah, this also works with different Git remotes. So we can use GitLab, we can use Bitbucket. If you want to have your own custom modules on any of these repositories, we've added the tooling now that allows you to install these modules directly and sub-workflows directly from there as well. And so it really opens up the way that you can install and manage these modules. All that would happen really is in your modules.json, you'll just have a different remote for where these modules are being tracked. Another really nice addition. So pretty much like the NF Core modules create, where you create a nice template of files that you need to edit and you know exactly what you need to do. We've also added a sub-workflows create that will prompt you for various information. And it will create these template files for you that you just have to fill out and submit a pull request with. And as I mentioned before, there's the create test YAML, which works in a similar way to the modules create test YAML. It will just create all of these tests. Once you've added the test, it will create that YAML for you automatically. And it will also repeat the tests. So one thing we learned the hard way is that certain tools add timestamps or other things within files, which means that you can't use MD5 sums to test because the MD5 sums are variable. And so in that case, what this tool will do is actually repeat the tests to make sure that, that whatever you're doing is right. And if it doesn't look right, then it will put a to-do statement in the file that you can just edit based on however you want to deal with this. So this is sort of the culmination of a lot of hard work that's been put in over the past couple of days. Julia probably wanted to kill me at various points because I was pestering her to really help out with some of the tooling on this. Various other people have contributed as well. So thank you. This is just the beginning though. We've got sub-workflows now. They're up and running. They're working. We need to improve this. We need to fill out the commands. We need to improve the tooling. And for that, we will still need your help to do that. That's kind of the status of what you can do, what modules are. The tooling that we've built to help you automate a lot of this stuff, as well as sub-workflows. There are tons of resources available, bite-sized talks like Phil mentioned, as well as we gave training, which is also on YouTube that you can refer to help out with this. We've got the awesome community where you can come and ask questions and contribute and help out and just get involved, dive in. As I mentioned, various ways you can communicate with us. Thank you very much. This has been awesome. Thank you to the M4 community, Nextflow community, Bioconda, Biocontainers, AWS, now Microsoft as well, who we've got funding. The plan eventually, I think, is to not only test modules. Now we're also testing sub-workflows, but we also want to be able to test workflows from end to end. And Edmund's created a pull request, I think he's here somewhere, where we can do that. And so where this will become powerful is that whenever you update a pipeline, you're checking all of the output files that it produces. And so if you change something and it breaks something, you'll know why, because that file no longer exists. If you change some publishing logic or something like that, you'll know why that doesn't exist. And so then that gives you a bit more confidence as to the changes that you're making to this pipeline. And also validation is quite important, especially in clinical settings where you're working on clinical samples and you have to really jump through hoops to get approval for things. And so that will be really powerful to do this from end to end eventually. And we're kind of working on that at the moment. But yeah, thank you for listening, and I'll see you around.
So I have a question from Alex. So he's asking, can you comment a bit about how you would envision that combining sub-workflows and modules from public and private repositories?
Sorry, I didn't get that. Combining...
So the idea is to have both public and private modules or sub-workflows. How can you combine that? Can you do it now?
Yeah, so that should work. There's a slight caveat with sub-workflows is that at the moment, it's a bit tricky, and we were talking about this at the hackathon yesterday, how we tackle this in the future. But providing the sub-workflows and any dependent modules are coming from the same repository, that should work. As I showed you, it should just track potentially as a different, coming from a different remote. And so that way the modules.json should just update itself. But if you have any issues and it doesn't work, let us know and we'll fix it.
Thank you.